Have you ever felt that something in the religion you know doesn't align with what Jesus Christ truly taught, but you couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong? What if the Bible itself revealed that practices treated as sacred were forbidden by the Son of God himself? In this study, you will learn the principles that God established and that the religion of men has ignored for centuries, from forbidden titles to true prayer, from hypocritical judgment to commerce in the temple. The faith that transforms begins when we courageously return to the words of Jesus Christ. Before continuing, confirm your subscription to the channel, support this ministry by clicking Become a Member, and comment here from which city or country you are watching. Or, there is a passage in the Bible that very few people stop to read with real attention, not because it is hard to understand, but because when understood it changes everything. It is in Matthew 23 verses 8 to 10, and in it, Jesus Christ speaks with a clarity that discomforts any religious structure that has ever existed or still exists today. Jesus forbade three things at once. He forbade his followers from using the title of rabbi, which means master, teacher, the one who holds supreme knowledge. He forbade anyone from being called a spiritual father, and he forbade the use of any title that would place one person above others as the ultimate authority within the community of faith. The justification he gives is simple and devastating. For you have one teacher, the Christ, and you are all brothers. God in this passage is not suggesting a preference, he is establishing an order. Now look at what the denominations have done with this. The Catholic Church calls its priests father, in Latin pater, which became padre, and calls its supreme leader pope, which literally means daddy. Protestantism, which was born promising to return to the Bible, created its own pedestals, pastors treated as unquestionable authorities, as if their word was worth more than the written word of God. And the Pentecostal movement, which emerged as a breath of renewal, soon managed to invent titles like apostle, bishop, patriarch, and a series of others that carry more weight than any brother should carry over another. And this is not a gratuitous criticism. It is a direct observation of what Jesus Christ himself forbade. Paul, writing to the Corinthians, already saw this problem taking shape right there, in the early years of the Christian faith. In 1 Corinthians 1:12-13, he asks with astonishment, "Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized in the name of Paul?" The problem is not new, but the answer is not new either. It is in the Bible itself waiting to be read. When a human being occupies the place that belongs only to Jesus Christ, something subtle and dangerous happens. The believer's faith begins to depend more on the leader than on God. The pastor's voice begins to have more weight than the voice of the Scriptures. The approval of the religious figure replaces divine grace, and the faithful, without realizing it, cease to have a relationship with God and begin to have a relationship with an institution, with a title, with a man. Jesus Christ did not come to build a pyramid, he came to level the ground. In him, all who believe are brothers, not hierarchically equal by protocol, but genuinely equal before God, who is the only Father and the only true Master. This is the structure he left, not an organization with positions and titles, but a family with one Lord. And knowing this opens up a question worth carrying with care. If the human structures of authority were forbidden by Jesus, what else has been built in the name of religion that directly contradicts what he taught? Praying in public to be seen. There is a type of spiritual deception that disguises itself as devotion, and for that very reason, it is so dangerous. It is not that obvious sin that everyone identifies from a distance. It is the deception that uses the language of faith, that wears the clothes of piety, that gets on stage with a Bible in hand and convinces everyone that they are in the presence of a man of God. But inside, the motivation is different, and Jesus Christ knew this better than anyone. In Matthew 6:5-6, he says with a clarity that cuts deep, "And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father, who is in secret. Anyone who reads this carefully realizes that Jesus was not attacking public prayer itself. Acts 2:42 records that the first Christians persevered in prayer together, in community. What he forbade was performative prayer, the kind that serves as a showcase, the kind that has an audience, and look how current this is. You just have to open any live stream of a service to see what prayer has become in many churches. A spectacle. The pastor who cries at the right time, who raises his voice at the moment of greatest emotion, not necessarily because he is touched by God, but because he knows he is being watched. Prayer has become a spiritual business card, a way to prove how anointed, how sensitive, how connected to the Father someone is. Jesus Christ saw this happening even back then, with the Pharisees who loved to pray on the corners and in the synagogues to be admired, and his verdict was direct. They have received their reward. The human audience was the only return they got. God was not in it. The faith that moves mountains does not live in performance, it lives in secret. This requires brutal honesty with one's own soul. Because it is easy to deceive others, it is even possible to deceive oneself for a while, but the Bible is clear. God looks at the heart. In 1 Samuel 16:7, this principle was already engraved. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And it is precisely this heart that needs to be examined every time someone opens their mouth to pray, whether in a service, in a small group, or at a microphone. True prayer does not need a stage. It happens in the closed room, at 3 in the morning, when no one is watching. It is there that faith is revealed as real, or revealed as empty. Jesus Christ did not say this to complicate anyone's life. He said it because the Father who sees in secret rewards what is done in secret, and no human approval comes close to what comes from him. But there is still another dimension to this teaching that Jesus brings up next, and it reveals something equally serious about how religion can distort even the way we speak to God. Repeating memorized prayers. Many people grow up thinking that praying is about knowing the right words, that if you repeat the correct formula, the right number of times, in the right way, God will listen. And it is precisely this belief that Jesus Christ came to dismantle with all clarity in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 6:7-8, the Bible records Jesus' words like this: "And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him." It seems simple, but this verse carries a spiritual weight that few stop to truly consider. What is a vain repetition? It is any prayer practice that relies on the mechanics of words and not on the sincerity of the heart. It is praying the same text 50 times, thinking that the quantity will convince God. It is reciting the Lord's Prayer automatically, like someone reading a medicine leaflet. The lips move, but the mind is elsewhere. It is decreeing, declaring, taking possession with the same formulas every week, as if there were a secret code that needs to be activated at the right frequency. Jesus Christ was absolutely direct. This type of prayer goes nowhere. And it is not because God is indifferent. It is exactly the opposite. He already knows what you need before you ask. That is in the text, with no room for interpretation. God does not need to be convinced by repeated petitions. He is a father. And when you treat him as a father, prayer ceases to be a ritual and becomes a conversation. The tone changes, the posture changes, even the faith that accompanies the request changes. Think about how a child talks to a real father. They do not recite a script. They come with an open heart, tell what they are feeling, ask for what they need, thank when they receive. There is no formula in this relationship. There is a bond. And this is exactly what the Bible points to as the model of Christian prayer, a living conversation, not a dead ritual. The problem is that over the centuries, many religious traditions have built structures of repetition that have become the center of spiritual practice. And when someone questions this based on the words of Jesus Christ, the reaction is usually one of resistance. But the faith that grows is the faith that always returns to the words of God, not to the traditions of men. This does not mean that every structured prayer is wrong. It means that the structure cannot replace the heart. When you pray with sincerity, Even if you use simple words, even if you stumble, even if you are not sure how to start, that reaches God. Because what he seeks is not eloquence, it is truth. And it is precisely this search for truth that opens the way to understanding what Jesus Christ taught about how prayer should really work. And this goes far beyond what most people imagine. Accumulating wealth. The money was never the problem. The heart is. This distinction matters more than it seems, and Jesus Christ was surgical in pointing it out in Matthew 6:19-21 when he said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Pay close attention to that last sentence. It is a spiritual X-ray. The treasure reveals the heart. It is that simple. And here is the knot that many people do not want to face. There is a huge difference between having money and making money the goal of life. Jesus did not forbid anyone from working, saving, or prospering. What he forbade was turning material accumulation into a spiritual goal, a sign of God's approval, a proof of faith. Because when that happens, the heart changes its address, and it stops living in God to live in the bank balance. This deviation is not new. The Bible already warned about it with impressive clarity. In 1 Timothy 6:9-10, Paul wrote, "But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils." Paul did not say that money itself is evil. He said that the love of money, the obsession, the desire to accumulate as an end in itself, is a root of destruction. A root. This means that other evils sprout from it. And what is seen today in many pulpits is exactly this love of money being wrapped in religious language and sold as a divine blessing. God wants you to be rich. Sow and you will reap 100-fold. These are phrases that sound nice, but directly contradict what Jesus Christ taught. In Luke 12:15, he was even more direct. "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." It does not consist. The life that God proposes has a different measure, and that measure does not fit in a bank account. The Christian faith was not built on material prosperity. It was built on the cross, surrender, and eternity. The apostles did not get rich. Paul was stoned, imprisoned, shipwrecked. Peter was crucified. And yet these men carried something that no private jet can buy, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. When someone's faith is genuinely anchored in Jesus Christ, that person's treasure ceases to be what the bank registers and becomes what heaven recognizes. This is not preaching poverty as a virtue. It is clarity about where the true value lies. And this clarity is precisely what separates a mature spirituality from a consumer spirituality. But there is still another layer to this issue, one that touches on something even more every day in the life of someone seeking to live according to the Bible. Judging others. There is a scene that repeats itself with frightening frequency within Christian communities. Someone raises a finger, points at another, and declares with full conviction that that person is wrong before God. And while the finger points, the eyes rarely turn inward. This was exactly what Jesus Christ addressed directly in Matthew 7:1-5. "Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce you will be judged, and with the measure you use it will be measured to you." This word is not a suggestion. It is a clear prohibition from the mouth of the Son of God himself. And it continues to sound uncomfortable for those who prefer to observe the faults of others before examining their own hearts. Before the classic doubt arises, but doesn't the Bible command us to discern? The answer is yes. In 1 Corinthians 5:12, Paul affirms that there is a responsibility to judge those who are within the community of faith. Discernment is necessary, real, and biblical. But there is a huge difference between discernment and hypocrisy, and it was hypocrisy that Jesus Christ condemned in no uncertain terms. Hypocritical judgment is that which points out the speck in a brother's eye while carrying a plank in one's own. The image Jesus used is almost comical in its absurdity, someone trying to remove a tiny splinter from another's eye without seeing the beam that pierces their own. It is impossible to have clarity when you yourself are compromised, and this happens with a regularity that is frightening. Christians judge homosexuals while engaging in gossip, and the Bible condemns gossip with the same seriousness that it condemns any other sin. They point at those who drink while gluttony dominates them at the table. They look askance at those who miss a service while hiding their own sins behind a religious facade. Romans 2:1 is devastating. Therefore you have no excuse, O man, whoever you are who judge, for in passing judgment on another you condemn yourself. God is not interested in hierarchies of sin set up to comfort the one who judges. Authentic faith begins when a person looks at themselves in the mirror with honesty, not to destroy themselves but to truly grow. Jesus Christ did not forbid discernment, he forbade arrogance disguised as piety. The instruction is precise. First, take the plank out of your own eye. This word carries weight. It is not a suggestion of sequence, it is an order of priority. Before any correction, before any pointing of fingers, there is internal work that needs to happen. This work is not weakness, it is the foundation of any faith that truly works in real life. When someone stops pointing fingers and starts looking inward, something changes. Reading the Bible ceases to be a search for verses that justify what one already thinks and becomes an honest dialogue with God. And it is precisely in this place of real humility that another dimension of the relationship with God begins to be revealed, one that religion often confuses, distorts, or simply ignores. Theoserator, making God's house a marketplace. Among all the scenes recorded in the Gospels, there is one that surprises even the most seasoned Christians familiar with Bible stories. It was not the calming of the storm, nor the multiplication of the loaves. It was a scene of deliberate and purposeful violence. Jesus Christ, the same one who taught to turn the other cheek, who healed lepers with tenderness and welcomed children with love, made a whip with his own hands and entered the temple, turning everything upside down. No gospel softens this moment. The Bible preserved it exactly as it happened. Matthew 21:12-13 records it bluntly. And Jesus entered the temple of God and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you make it a den of robbers." It was not an impulsive gesture or a passing emotional reaction. It was the clearest expression that there is something God simply does not tolerate, and that the Christian faith must face with complete honesty. What was the issue with those sellers? Superficially, they were offering a service. The pigeons were for sacrifices. The money changers exchanged coins so that pilgrims could pay the temple tax. It was convenient, practical, apparently necessary. And that is exactly where the spiritual danger lies. When commercial convenience begins to occupy sacred space, it does not appear as sacrilege. It even seems to be serving God. But Jesus Christ saw it differently, and the Bible recorded that he did not just speak, he acted. Today, the setting has changed, but not the essence. Holy water sold in bottles, consecrated ointments with a label and a price, tickets for prophetic conferences, raffles and bazaars within the temples themselves, all packaged with spiritual language, all justified as support for the ministry. The faith of simple people who enter that place genuinely seeking the presence of God ends up being treated as a market opportunity. What should be a house of prayer has slowly been transformed into a showcase for sacred products. It is important to understand that Jesus Christ's indignation was not against the money itself. The Bible never forbade churches from receiving offerings or ministers from being supported by the gospel. The problem was the wrong place with the wrong motivation. The space consecrated for worship had been turned into a commercial point. John 2:16 reports the same episode with a detail that cuts deep. Jesus said that his Father's house had been turned into a house of trade. The Father's house. Not just any structure, a space for communion, for reverence, for a genuine encounter with the eternal. The call that resonates here is for discernment. True faith knows how to distinguish what serves God from what serves profit in the name of God. And when this discernment begins to be refined within someone, other layers of religious behavior also begin to reveal contradictions that went unnoticed, some of them even more subtle than a stall of products inside the temple. Making oaths and vows, the seven bomb. Every Sunday, in thousands of churches across Brazil, a scene repeats itself with a frightening naturalness. The pastor summons the congregation to make a vow. Raise your hand if you will be faithful in your tithe for 90 days. Make a covenant of faith with God. Decree and declare. The people raise their hands, repeat aloud, sign financial commitments, all with the genuine feeling of pleasing God. But there is a detail that almost no one mentions. Jesus Christ explicitly and directly forbade this. In Matthew 5:33-37, in the heart of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus states without reservation, "Do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one." Malignant. That word was not chosen by chance. Jesus Christ used it with full awareness and with the seriousness that the context absolutely demands. The issue goes much deeper than it seems. When someone needs to make an oath to show they will keep a promise, what does that reveal? It reveals that the person's simple word is not sufficient on its own. And that is exactly where Jesus touches, on a point that authentic Christian faith cannot ignore. The problem is not the absence of a solemn vow. The problem is the absence of character. The Christian truly formed in God's teaching does not need to swear anything, because their yes is already yes, and their no is already no. Genuine integrity speaks louder than any elaborate religious ceremony. James 5:12 reinforces exactly what Jesus taught. "But above all, my brothers, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation." Two distinct records in the Bible, the same clear and unequivocal instruction. And yet, campaigns of 30-day, 90-day, one-year vows continue to be promoted as legitimate tools for spiritual growth, with no basis in the words of Jesus Christ. Biblical faith never depended on vows to sustain itself. Abraham did not make a financial pact with God to prove his devotion. David did not go up on a stage raising his hand and committing future resources. The relationship with God, as the Bible describes from the beginning, is built on trust, obedience, and love, not on spiritual contracts extracted in moments of collective euphoria. Jesus Christ came precisely to free human beings from this type of religiosity that weighs more than it transforms. When someone makes a vow that they later cannot fulfill, guilt appears, shame arrives, and often the person begins to drift away from the faith, thinking they have failed God. But the problem was never in the non-fulfillment. It was in the demand for the vow itself. A practice that Jesus called of malignant origin cannot be the foundation of a healthy Christian community. And there are still other practices equally ingrained in religious tradition that the Bible also questions with the same cutting precision. Seeking the first places. There is something profoundly revealing in the way people behave when they think no one is paying attention. It is in these moments, in a meeting, a service, a conference, that the truth of the heart appears with a clarity that no sermon can disguise. And Jesus Christ, who knew the human heart like no one else, knew this exactly when he told the parable recorded in Luke 14:7-11. The scene is simple. A banquet, guests arriving and everyone wanting to take the best seat. Jesus observes everything and speaks with that precision that only he has. When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. It sounds like a lesson in etiquette, but it is not. It is an X-ray of the human soul, and of the religion that man builds when he abandons the ways of God. Because the issue is not where you sit, it is what you believe you deserve. And there lies the knot that the Bible tightens firmly. The search for position, for status, for prominence within a community of faith is the exact opposite of what Jesus Christ taught. It is not a small deviation. It is a complete inversion of the gospel. What is seen in many churches today would be hard to explain to someone who only read the Gospels. There is a meticulously constructed hierarchy, where titles like bishop and apostle define who has more authority, who gets on stage, who receives the applause. Conferences sell more expensive tickets for those who want to sit closer to the famous preacher. The place of honor is not earned through service, it is bought or negotiated. And all this happens within spaces that call themselves the house of God. Jesus was surgical in Mark 10:43-44. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. There is no room for another interpretation. The greatest is the one who serves the most, not the one with the most followers, the most likes, or the most chains around their neck. The faith that Jesus Christ preached had no VIP stage. It had a towel, a basin of water, and the Son of God washing the disciples' feet. In Matthew 23:6-7, the Bible records one of Jesus' harshest rebukes, directed at the religious leaders of his time. He accuses them of loving the best seats in the synagogues and the greetings in the marketplaces. 2,000 years have passed. The scenery has changed, the clothes have changed, but the vanity remains, and where vanity governs, genuine faith suffocates. Understanding this teaching is not an intellectual exercise, it is a matter of posture before God. Whoever seeks the first place is, in practice, saying that they are more important than others, and this contaminates everything. Prayer, service, relationships with the community. Humility is not weakness. In the logic of the kingdom, it is the only legitimate path to greatness. And this principle is not restricted to the church environment. It touches an area that is perhaps even more sensitive in the life of someone who tries to follow Jesus Christ with sincerity. Performative little ones. There is a warning in the Gospels that few preachers have the courage to read aloud from the pulpit. Not because it is obscure, not because it is difficult to understand, but precisely because it is too clear, and it points directly into the religious structures we cherish so much. Jesus Christ, when speaking of the little ones, was not being poetic, he was being severe. In Matthew 18:6 the words are direct. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. There is not, in all the Gospels, a heavier warning than this, and in Mark 10:14 the same Jesus Christ who said this also declared, "Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God." Two sides of the same teaching. Bringing them near is a commandment, pushing them away is a condemnation. Now, who are these little ones? They are the simple, those who arrive without doctrine, without theological vocabulary, without a history in the faith. They are the new converts who do not yet know a verse by heart, who come with raw questions and open hearts. The Bible calls them little not with contempt, but with tenderness, because God knows that every great man of faith was once exactly that, someone starting from scratch, needing acceptance and not barriers. And it is precisely here that things get uncomfortable, because the question that Jesus Christ places before any Christian community is this: what have you done with the little ones? Have you brought them closer to God, or have you built walls between them and Him? The Bible records in Matthew 23:13 that the Pharisees shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, and Jesus Christ rebuked them for it with a harshness that leaves no room for a soft interpretation. When someone comes to a community seeking God and finds an association form, a list of requirements, a dress code, a tithing ruler to be considered faithful, that someone is being hindered. Not by any human gatekeeper, but by a structure that has placed itself between the person and Jesus Christ. And the faith that could have germinated there is suffocated before it is even born. The most serious thing is when the new believer finds not a bureaucratic obstacle, but a corrupted moral mirror. When they see the leadership acting contrary to what they preach, when they perceive legalism crushing grace, when they feel that God has been replaced by an institution that demands, excludes, and judges. In those moments a little one stumbles. And according to the very words of Jesus Christ, whoever caused this stumbling carries a weight that no millstone can surpass. The faith of the little ones is fragile not because of their weakness, but because of the nature of any beginning. It is like a newly planted seed. It needs soil, water, care. God takes care of this seed, but He expects those who claim to follow Him to also take care of it. The Bible is forceful. Protecting the little ones is not optional. It is a central part of what it means to live the gospel. And what makes this teaching even more profound is that it does not end the issue here. Because when Jesus Christ speaks of the little ones, he is also speaking of something that lives within every adult believer, that part that still needs tenderness, acceptance, not to be judged before it grows. There is a little one in each person who seeks God, and what we do with them within ourselves and in others reveals much more about our faith than any Sunday sermon ever could. And you, throughout this journey, we have walked together today. Which of these teachings has touched your faith most deeply? Is there something Jesus Christ said here that is still echoing within you, something you had never stopped to consider with this seriousness? Tell us in the comments. Your testimony may be exactly what another brother or sister needs to hear today to not give up on their faith. If this content made sense to you, if it opened a new window in the way you read the Bible and see Jesus Christ, consider subscribing to the channel and activating the bell, because there is much more to come, and each video is a step in this journey of returning to what God really said. And if you want to sow into this work up close, click the Become a Member button and be a part of it in a more special way. In the next video, we will continue to open the Bible with this same honesty, because there is still much that religion has built that needs to be brought before the light of the Word of God. May the peace of Jesus Christ guard your heart and your mind. May God look with mercy upon your life, your family, and may every step of your faith walk be illuminated by Him. Until next time.